The afternoon session of hearing 4, day 3. And we have here representatives from the Vision Kerikeri Carbon Neutral Trust and Karapura Conservation Trust. I understand you'll be doing a joint presentation. Who is going to lead on?
Well, I'll make the introduction. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for the opportunity to present to you once again. We are representing 3 volunteer community groups. Dr. Melanie Miller is of the Kapiro Conservation Trust. Inge Bremer is a trustee of the Carbon Neutral New Zealand Trust Kerikeri branch. I'm Rolf Müller-Blodde, acting chair of Vision Kerikeri. And we have also engaged Andrew Mantua to our team for additional kiwi protection evidence provided by Kiwi Coast in Northland. This is a joint submission, as you know already, because the protection of the environment is of high importance to all of us. Our groups are made of hundreds of dedicated volunteers who have spent decades observing and protecting Northland's unique natural environment. Among us are renowned scientists and highly observant Kaitiaki, who have all contributed to our detailed background papers and previous submissions. While our groups are Kerikeri based, our proposals are valid and important for the whole district. That avoids your question, just in publicity. Okay.
I'll start out. I'm Gabriela from the Carbon Neutral New Zealand Trust. And I cover, in this case, pages 1 to 9 of our statement, which is the importance of implementing very precise rules to protect Northland's biodiversity and ecosystems, and to avoid the cumulative effects of many new developments. As we have noted in our submissions, the current PDP chapter on ecosystems and indigenous biodiversity falls a bit short of fully realizing the objectives of the IMA, the RPS, and other relevant provisions. It is concerning that some submitters are seeking to weaken the text even further. We need to strengthen the PDP policies, and when I say we, I mean we as very interested stakeholders and people who live here and pay the rates, together with the council, trying to put in as much information as we have gathered and that we can still accumulate. We need to strengthen the PDP policies to ensure they align with the Council's functions and obligations as stated in the RMA. For instance, the RMA obliges us to safeguard the life-supporting capacity of ecosystems and to maintain indigenous biological diversity, and also to recognize and protect significant indigenous vegetation and habitats. These are not mere suggestions, they are core functions and obligations that must be reflected in the PDP. And I'm glad to see Jerome here, who is in charge of that area, and I hope that he will help us to strengthen this. The strategic direction for the natural environment in the PDP includes objectives like active management of ecosystems to, number 1, protect and increase biodiversity, and number 2, protecting significant habitats for future generations. These are excellent goals, but the policies and rules currently in the PDP do not effectively support them in our point of view. We need clear, strong policies that genuinely protect and enhance our indigenous biodiversity. For example, our notes from 2021 show that the draft PDP included a policy aimed at protecting indigenous biodiversity by considering various factors when assessing land use and subdivision proposals. This has since been weakened, and it says to manage in the current BDP version instead of protect. And the recent Section 42 report on indigenous biodiversity P10 suggests only to consider, which further dilutes the protection. Moreover, the current rules primarily focus on the area of indigenous vegetation that can be cleared without a resource consent, which is inadequate for genuine protection. The unique flora and fauna of Aotearoa have evolved over millions of years of isolation, resulting in a high percentage of endemic species. This uniqueness places a significant responsibility on decision makers, tangata whenua, and the community to protect these species from further harm. Since human settlement, we've seen a significant loss of indigenous species due to habitat modification, over-harvesting, and the introduction of pests. We have a lot of further examples on that. Protecting indigenous biodiversity is not just about preserving our natural heritage. It is really crucial for human well-being and environmental health. I refer now to page 4 of our statement about biodiversity. This is just a very brief summary of everything here. Biodiversity ensures ecosystem stability, which is really crucial for our resilience and productivity. It supports essential services such as pollination, soil formation, nutrient recycling, water purification, and we know how crucial that is here, and climate regulation. Climate regulation is topmost, I think, for this area where we have so much weather influence, with resulting road problems and other problems, of course, also for our agriculture and horticulture and forestry. These services are foundations for human health, economic stability, and cultural identity. In Northland, the loss of biodiversity has been particularly severe. The reports indicate a 99% loss of podocarp forest, a 96% of kauri and of volcanic broadleaf forests, and a 95% loss of freshwater wetlands and dune forests. Many of our bird species, reptiles, and other wildlife are now classified as threatened or at risk. We have tables supporting that information. But we all know that our fauna and flora have suffered considerably, and for example, the loss of tuna here is 90% plus, right? Which is, tuna is important for nutrition here as well. The extinction of approximately 50 indigenous bird species in Aotearoa highlights the critical need for action and support. We urge the Council to adopt more stringent policies and rules as a PDP to protect our unique ecosystems. Let us not weaken our resolve or the text that governs these protections. Instead, let's bolster them to ensure that future generations can experience and benefit from the rich biodiversity that defines Northland. In conclusion, we call on you to consider the detailed background papers and previous submissions we have provided. We need your support to make sure the PDP check on ecosystems and indigenous biodiversity is robust, effective, and capable of preserving Northland's natural heritage for the future. Our background papers analysis of RMA obligations and PDP alignment, data on loss of biodiversity enhancement, and recommendations for strengthening the PDP policies and rules. Thanks for your time and consideration. Next.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I tend to have a bit of a quiet voice, so if you can't hear, please just tell me. As mentioned by Carbon Neutral Trust, we believe that the text of the PD policies and provisions need to be strengthened to actually implement all the relevant provisions of the RMA and other, the RPS and other relevant provisions. And in box 1, page 2 of our statement, we give a few examples. So we believe that the chapter on indigenous biodiversity, the objectives and policies don't yet cover the full range of ecological matters specified in the RMA, for example. Inga has already mentioned that RMA section 5 refers to safeguarding the life supporting capacity of ecosystems, which is one of the section 5 purposes. And at present, IB policy P2 and IB P3 seem to address only ecosystems that are particularly vulnerable to modification rather than ecosystems in general. So it seems to be applying for a subset. We noted that, as another example, RMA section 5 refers to intrinsic values and places an obligation to pay particular regard to the intrinsic values of ecosystems when managing the use, development and protection of natural resources, RMA section 7. And again, we did not find intrinsic values being mentioned or recognised in the draft as yet. RMA Schedule 4, which I'm sure you'll all be familiar with, includes matters that must be addressed by assessments of environmental effects. And that includes, quote, any effect on ecosystems, including effects on plants or animals, and any physical disturbance of habitats in the vicinity. And again, those phrases are far broader than many of the more limited, restricted phrases that are actually found in the draft chapter. Moreover, as mentioned, the rules in the biodiversity really focus and address on the amount or extent of indigenous vegetation that can be cut down. And although it's a difficult thing to do, we don't see any rules that actually seek to actively protect or implement some of these wider provisions in the RPS and the RMA. So basically, in terms of the RMA provisions that are not fully included in the chapter, our group seeks that the chapter should be amended to cover the full range of ecological matters specified in the RMA, but also the RPS and applicable parts of the National Policy Statement of Indigenous Biodiversity and other relevant provisions. When it comes to the Regional Policy Statement for Northland, as you're aware, under the RMA Section 75, the district plan is required to give effect to the RPS and must avoid inconsistency with the regional plan. The district plan can be more stringent, cannot be more relaxed. And in our view, there are some RPS provisions that have not yet been fully implemented in the PCP. Just a few examples. The notified version of IB Policy 1, P1, referred specifically to the Ecological Significance Criterion RPS Appendix 5. However, the Section 42 report recommends deleting it, and we don't see that that is a positive change. In the overview text, we support the Section 42 amendment to which would specifically refer to Appendix 5. But then when it comes to the policies, rather than deleting Appendix 5, as proposed by the Section 42 report, we believe that Appendix 5 does provide important provisions that the PDP must give effect to. And more importantly, while it covers many similar elements to the national policy statement, it was drafted, the RPS was drafted in a manner that's more specific and suitable to this region, and has some elements, some regional criteria that are tailored to regional conditions, and we think it's important. So when it comes to the IB policies, we think that they should specifically say words to the effect that ecological assessments must be carried out in accordance with the criteria in Appendix 5 of the RPS, and must implement all other parts, relevant parts of the IPS. We also think that the revised definition of significant natural areas should include and refer to the RPS Appendix 5 specifically. We, in our group, have spent quite a lot of time reading and commenting on consent applications put forward with some of the wider developments. And in our experience, the assessments of environmental effects by developers often don't pay due attention to Appendix 5. In fact, overall, many of the ecological assessments provided are really quite low quality. And so we recommend that the RPS Appendix 5 should actually be reproduced as an appendix to the PDP or a body of the PDP to ensure that it's noticed and properly considered in assessments of environmental effects for consent applications. If things aren't stated clearly, they do tend to get brushed over. We're also concerned about cumulative effects and the potential long-term effects of activities. But as you'll be aware, the RPS policy 5.1.1 refers to potential cumulative effects and potential long-term effects. And Section 3 of the RMA also states that the term effect includes any cumulative effect which arises over time or in combination with other effects, which you would know about. But again, in our experience, cumulative effects are not given adequate consideration when making decisions or even when applicants put forward consent applications. And we consider that the PDP strongly needs to make specific reference to cumulative effects and RPS policy 5.1.1, preferably repeating it verbatim. Because we do believe, as stated in our submissions, that all relevant chapters of the PDP should specifically recognise the need to identify and address any cumulative effects and potential cumulative effects, and require sufficient information to assess the potential long-term effects of the proposed activity on the environment. When it comes to some of the other issues that we've noted of concern in our submission, existing titles that have specific areas of indigenous vegetation that are protected by covenants. We're talking about properties that have areas that are already protected by covenants through the Council's resource consenting process. We've noted that there doesn't seem to be any central register of these. We've seen cases where property has come up for sale and the estate agent is giving the impression that the whole area can be developed, whereas, we are aware that there are areas protected by covenant. And obviously, the PDP proposed to set up a Schedule 4 that could record SMAs. The SMAs, we acknowledge, have been set aside for the time being, but we do think that the area that's Schedule 4 still perform a useful role, because the areas of vegetation and ecological features that have already been protected through the consent process can and should be protected in Schedule 4, in our view, or an equivalent mechanism for recording them in a public way. And we feel that the postponement of the SMA is not a justification for ignoring these protected sites. We also think that even before the SMA mapping and SMA provisions are coming to effect, we don't know how many years that may take. In the meantime, all new areas that are protected via the consenting process should also be recorded in a schedule list promptly, because we think this would help actually with their protection if there's some kind of register. Preferably, we do think that these protected sites should also be visible in special overlay maps. That would be very helpful. You could even consider that their protected status could be formally recognised by giving them a special type of, not a zoning, but some kind of label that protects the high ecological values at the site. Our statement contains, and submissions contain a range of other specific amendments and comments. And I just wanted to highlight a few of them on page 9 of the statement in front of you. So in IB02, the objective there, we would rather, the current text refers to managing biodiversity, the current text, I should say, as revised or recommended by the Section 42 report, refers to managing biodiversity, and it's very use-oriented and fails to give effect to the environmental bottom lines required by the RNA, in our view, and we would prefer to see text such as the extent and diversity of indigenous biodiversity across the district is retained, protected, and enhanced, or words to that effect. We think also it would be helpful to have a new objective after IB04, something along the lines of landowners, land occupiers, and Kaitiaki stewards are encouraged and supported to protect and enhance indigenous biodiversity and intrinsic ecological values of the land they have an interest in. And to add to that, in IBP1, we do support the specific recognition of the role and responsibilities of Tangata Whenua as Kaitiaki. But in addition, we seek a statement that also recognises the role and responsibilities of landowners and others as stewards in protecting, maintaining and restoring biodiversity. This would be consistent with the text of IB04. In IBP4, we think it's desirable to delete the word significant before adverse effects because it limits, because policy 310 of the national LPS IB doesn't actually limit the use of the effects of the hierarchy only to cases of significant adverse effects. So, in other words, IBP4 should just refer to adverse effects rather than significant ones alone. And then my final point, IBP 10. We would wish to add information along the lines that the extent to which the variety and range of indigenous species is maintained and the extent to which ecological integrity is maintained. We think those would assist in improving the situation. Sorry, I thought I'd continue. Just one other quick point. The operative district plan provisions. So in our view, it would be a backward step if the PDP contains weaker provisions than the existing provisions in the operative district plan. In other words, the existing provisions. And there are a paper in box 2, page 11, gives some examples of the existing ODP provisions relating to ecology. We notice in particular that ODP policy 12242 and method 12256, they both refer to whether the area contains critical, endangered, vulnerable, or rare taxa, or taxa of indeterminate threatened status. This is along the lines that you will recognise with the RPS Appendix 5. Well, we don't see words like that in the PDP, and this is a significant difference. We think that the text to support taxa with indeterminate threatened status and other factors that are in the ODP but not in the PDP should be included in the PDP. The ODP, in effect, has adopted a precautionary approach on this point, which is very appropriate. In IBP2 and IBP3, we would wish to see inclusion of text on vulnerable, such as the section 42 of the Report Amendment, which refers to systems that are particularly vulnerable to modification. But our only worry about that term is that it's a qualified type of vulnerable, only vulnerable to modification rather than vulnerable full stop, if you see what I mean. So I would like to draw a line there, and thank you for your patience in listening. And now I think I hand it back to Rolf Curie for the next section.
Yes, although when we are talking for all groups combined, rather than one after another. So I will cover the critical issues surrounding the clearance of indigenous vegetation and the dangers of uncontrolled dog activities. Let's dive into the specifics and understand why we need strict rules to protect our precious environment.
Which section are you reading from right now? Where do you started reading from? Because you jumped around different presentations, just to be sure that we're on the same page.
I think it's page 5. Oh, vegetation, sorry, page 9. It's lower.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, I think because you're presenting the submission joint fashion, you're sort of jumping around.
Yes.
If you could just guide us as to which bit, because we're trying to follow it in a linear fashion, and so yeah.
Okay, yes, sorry.
I think it's extremely well prepared, so
Yes.
and it reads very well.
Okay, yeah, I got some pages numbered here, so. Specific. We need strict rules to protect precious environment and vulnerable species. So let's start with the clearance of indigenous vegetation. So page 9. Amendments are needed for Rule IBR1. The currently proposed rule IBR1 allows for the clearance of indigenous vegetation for various purposes. However, some of these purposes are too broad and need revision. For instance, allowing the clearances of dead trees or vegetation under 10 years old can harm at-risk species and habitats. I think it follows there then that residential unit construction, IBR1, PER17, currently this rule permits clearing up to 1,000 square meters of indigenous vegetation for building a residential unit without considering if existing clear areas can be used alternatively. This doesn't align with the Resource Management Act directive to maintain significant indigenous vegetation and habitats. We recommend amendments to limit this clearance to situations where no existing clear areas are available, ensuring areas of significant vegetation are protected. Quantified clearance rules, IBR3 and IBR4. These rules allow a certain area of vegetation to be cleared annually or over 5 years. This death of 1,000 cuts, as one says, approach can result in significant cumulative loss over time. We propose setting stricter limits on clearance over longer periods, such as 10 or 20 years, to mitigate this impact. The rules must be changed to reduce areas to be cleared. Practical problems exist also with vegetation clearance. Heavy machinery used in vegetation clearance often leads to the destruction of indigenous plants, even when the intent is to clear exotic vegetation. We suggest that rules should apply to any vegetation that includes indigenous species. We had an example that ourselves. We used to have an orchard, and we had told a contractor to remove all the weedy trees along the Wairua stream. And when we came about an hour after the digger started working, all trees were gone. And so we urgently stopped them and followed the instructions to work around the indigenous trees, of course. Can happen very quickly and without any thought. So I think good rules need to be in place to avoid that. Also, promoting methods like drill and fill of dealing with large or exotic trees can help protect native vegetation. In respect of protecting vulnerable species, clearing vegetation, including exotic plants and areas with vulnerable species like kiwi, requires stringent procedures. Landowners should coordinate with the Department of Conservation or groups like Kiwi Coast to create plans that protect these species before starting any clearance. An appendix in the PDP could outline these protocols to ensure consistent protection measures. I'll come now to animals. Page 11. First of all, I'd like to stress that we love animals. Dogs, cats, pets are important for people. We have heard that from various other groups. However, we strongly believe that they need to be in appropriate places and controlled appropriately to avoid harm caused by them. Impact of introduced mammals. Research shows that introduced mammals, including pets, are major threats to New Zealand's native biodiversity. Existing policies in the operative district plan restrict domestic predators to protect indigenous species like kiwi, dotterel, and brown teal. These restrictions need to be retained and even strengthened in the proposed district plan. And we need to add integrated methods of predator control rules, which is often done by volunteers, and we need to remove restrictions in the, no, we would need to add restrictions in the district plan, and communication about education for dogs in the bylaw training is all necessary. And you will find a lot of examples on page 18 and 20. With results of what happens when dogs go out in the wild and kill kiwi and other birds, either accidentally, playfully, or because of their nature. Dog threats to kiwis. Dog's strategic plan for Northland brown kiwi highlights dogs as the single biggest threat to kiwi populations. Keeping dogs out of kiwi habitats is essential to prevent attacks, as even well-behaved dogs can kill kiwi. We must oppose any submission that seeks to remove dog restrictions in the PDP. Dogs can also harm other ground-dwelling and wetland birds, disrupting their feeding and nesting activities. This stress can lead to decreased breeding success and population declines, especially for already endangered species like bittern and brown teal. There's another risk from dogs, and that can be uncontrolled dogs can pose a risk not only to wildlife, but also to humans. Please refer to page 14, which has an impressive chart by injuries related from dogs. In 2023, there was actually 435 cases. The Farmhouse District Council, Farmhouse District, has a high rate of dog-related injuries, with cases increasing over the years. Removing dog restrictions would likely exacerbate this problem. Cats are also predators of native species, including kiwi chicks and wetland birds. Studies suggest that effective exclusion zones for cats should be substantial, particularly in areas near vulnerable habitats. Okay, now into wetlands. Conservation of natural character. Page 15. Natural character, waterways and wetlands. The RMA emphasizes preserving the natural character of coastal environments, wetlands and river margins. The PDP should reflect this by restricting excessive earthworks and vegetation clearance in these areas, aligning with national and regional policies. For coastal environment protection, recent mapping changes have reduced the areas designated as coastal environments, which diminishes protection for large coastal lands. We need to restore broader protection zones to safeguard the visual and ecological qualities of all areas that are visible from marine areas. And finally, I would like to reiterate again, having talked against the problems, or about the problems of pets, like cats, dogs and cats. We love them, and we repeat they are important. However, they need to be in appropriate places, controlled appropriately to avoid harm caused by them. They need to be kept separate from natural reserves. In conclusion, In summary, the clearance of indigenous vegetation and management of pets such as dogs need strict rules to protect our environment and vulnerable species. Amendments to the PDP should ensure that significant indigenous vegetation and habitats are preserved and that effective measures are in place to control predators and pets. Let's work together to safeguard the natural beauty and biodiversity of our region for future generations. Thank you for your attention and commitment to these crucial issues. And the points about kiwi controls will be further presented by Andrew, what we can do to protect them.
So I'll just give a brief introduction. So we had planned for 2 members of our team to present online, but instead Andrew Mentor has been able to come in person, which we think will be much more preferable. And Andrew is now going to summarise some additional supporting evidence for our team, focusing on the issue of kiwi protection pets in particular. And Andrew Mentor is a member of our team and coordinator of Kiwi Coast Mid-North area, a group that coordinates kiwi protection across the district. And he also manages the Pura Peninsula Predator Control Project. But first, Andrew is going to summarise information provided by specialist Dr. John Cochrane. John Cochrane is Professor Emeritus at Massey University. He's worked there many years and recently retired, and he has more than 40 years of experience in research and field studies with animals in all vertebrate groups in a wide range of habitats. He's published about more than 100 refereed journal articles, scientific papers. He's given written and oral evidence at hearings, the High Court, Environmental Court, and on behalf of BNB. And so Andrew is just going to summarise some of that information. Thank you.
Thanks, Melanie. Yes, I'd just like to summarise the main points of Dr. John Cochrane's evidence. In his scope of evidence, he talks about the classification of Northland brown kiwi, the Northland brown kiwi habitat, foraging behaviour and diet, and thirdly, the threats to Northland brown kiwi. The classification of Northland brown kiwi is into one of 5 species of kiwi. There are 4 geographical forms based on genetic differences, i.e. 4 taxa, recognised for the North Island brown kiwi. These forms are Northland, Coromandel, Eastern and Western brown kiwi. The Northland brown kiwi is slightly larger and heavier than the other brown kiwi taxa and differs in its genetic makeup, behaviour and ecology. The Northland brown kiwi habitat, foraging behaviour and diet includes damp gullies in indigenous and plantation forest, dense shrubland, wetlands, gorse-dominant shrubland and pasture. Northland brown kiwi are nocturnal and generally have multiple daytime shelters within their territory. Shelters can be burrows, fallen ecofronds, hollow logs and dense vegetation. Kiwi diet predominantly consists of invertebrates such as insect larvae, weta, crickets, centipedes, moths and earthworms. Northland brown kiwi forage in pasture and also may roost during the day in pasture. Cunningham and Castro found that prey capture rates to be significantly higher in pasture than in forest, suggesting a greater availability of prey in pasture than in forest. This was confirmed by Dixon, who found that invertebrate abundance was consistently higher in pasture than in forest, scrub or swamp habitats. Invertebrate abundance varied seasonally, with seasonal changes in abundance greater in pasture than in other habitats. Invertebrate abundance in pasture was markedly higher in January, February and March than in other months. Surface invertebrates in pasture, including grass grub and field crickets, were a greater proportion of the kiwi diet in summer than in other seasons, indicating that pasture was seasonally important for kiwi feeding. Point number 3, the threats to Northland brown kiwi. The main threats to Northland brown kiwi are habitat loss and predation by introduced mammals, especially dogs, ferrets, stoats and cats. Kiwi in Northland are also vulnerable to other threats, including vehicle strike, capture in possum traps if they're set on the ground, and falling into water troughs. Predation by dogs has been identified as the largest issue for Northland brown kiwi, especially in areas where kiwi habitat overlaps with or is close to human populations. There are frequent reports of kiwi killed by dogs in Northland. The Department of Conservation's taxon plan for Northland brown kiwi reported that habitat loss and predation by introduced mammal predators, in particular dogs, stoats, cats and ferrets, remain ongoing threats to kiwi recovery. In Northland, predation remains the primary cause of decline in all unmanaged populations. All dogs are a threat to kiwi, regardless of breed, temperament and training. The most effective way of preventing a dog from attacking a kiwi is to ensure it never comes into contact with a kiwi. And the easiest way to achieve this is to keep dogs out of kiwi habitat at all times. Further, dogs are currently the single biggest threat facing Northland kiwi, surpassing even the impact of unmanaged stoat populations. Dogs can cause massive and rapid localised reductions in kiwi populations and are able to kill kiwi at all life stages. Their being able to kill adults is of particular concern, as the loss of adults greatly reduces population recruitment. At present, it is domestic, i.e. pet, farm or hunting dogs that are responsible for kiwi deaths. Dogs of all sizes, breeds and training are attracted to the smell of kiwi, and any dog can kill a kiwi. Kiwi deaths due to dogs are the main cause for the average life expectancy of 14 years in Northland, compared to life expectancies of 30 to 40 years elsewhere in the North Island. The greatest mortality of kiwi ascribed to a single dog occurred in Waitangi State Forest in 1987, with an estimated 500 kiwi killed over several months. Kiwi had been killed but not eaten, and it was suggested that the dog could have killed up to 10 to 15 kiwi each night. Prolonged droughts reduced foraging opportunities for kiwi, and periods of drought in 2019 and 2020 may have caused an increase in mortality of Northland brown kiwi. So I'll finish the submission by John Cochrane there, and it'll be tabled.
But just to clarify, you're reading this evidence on behalf of...
On behalf of
Professor Cochrane?
Professor Cochrane.
Is that because he can't be here?
Correct.
Unfortunately, you have to be on the plane.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
It puts us in a position where we can't really ask any questions because you haven't prepared that evidence, you're reading it on behalf, but we're happy to receive it as his evidence.
I've also prepared a submission statement as well.
Okay, oh good. But one of the, perhaps I could just ask a question now generally, is we had evidence yesterday from the Bay of Islands watchdogs, and they gave us evidence sort of quite contrary to what you're putting to us, and that their view was that kiwi predation by dogs was overrepresented, and that it was much lower. We asked them, where did you get your evidence from? I'll put the same question to you, is where do you get your dog predation evidence from? Yeah, I mean,
There is a dog report on it. The dog report is on the dog website, and it's report number 1392 or something.
yes.
It's somewhere in the writing.
And just a question about the population of kiwi in Auckland as well. Has it increased over time? That was another point made. Do you have any, comment about kiwi population in Auckland?
Yes, I do, and I covered some of that in my statement.
Great.
Shall I go into that?
Yes, carry on, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the answer is on page 13 on the bottom. It is the website of dog, about dog access to representation at work. And that includes also
Is
the,
that a footnote?
yes,
Which footnote?
which number 23.
Number 23, thank you.
And page 18 also, there's a table of examples of
Yeah.
kiwi killed by dogs in Northland, largely based on the dog data, but also supported by, or supplemented by some other cases we're aware of from
Yes,
Peter Grant,
your
reliable journalists from the Herald, Kiwi Coast and some other organisations. And these are just examples. I would stress that Doc makes the point that a number of cases of Kiwi deaths due to dog attacks occur in bush or undergrowth, and people don't see them and they don't report them. In contrast, when Kiwi are killed on the road, people tend to see it, so they are more reported. There's a higher reported rate, if you like, than for the Kiwi that are killed in undergrowth.
And I think you've referred to the Kiwi and, Professor Cockles refers to Kiwi in pasture. Would I be right to think that that's possible? Probably happening at night time than during the day?
Both, if I may. So they're in the pasture at nighttime feeding, and they are also roosting. They have multiple day nests, including in pasture.
Okay.
Especially, I think, during drought time, when they're looking for something to drink.
Right, okay.
The report on dog is called OIAD 3291,
Page 19.
page 19, mentioned in the further information.
Yes, great. No, thank you. You've given us the references we need.
Thank you. Statement, I provide comment on behalf of Kiwi Coast Trust. Substantial kiwi protection effort in Northland. The total estimated kiwi population in the whole of Northland is approximately 8,000 birds. Kiwi have been and are present in very high densities in specific areas within the far north. Kiwi call densities above 5 calls per hour are rated as high. It has been feasible to maintain and even increase kiwi populations in areas where local groups carry out predator control and there is effective management of dogs. Many community groups, iwi, hapu, companies, schools and other organisations have been undertaking predator control and eradication programs as part of Northland Regional Council's regional pest plans, Save the Kiwi and the National Predator-Free 2050 objectives. This Kiwi protection effort has involved thousands of volunteer hours over several decades. 259 organisations and entities are currently involved with kiwi protection in Northland. Last year, 4,538 people attended Kiwi Coast supported events and capacity building workshops about kiwi protection, taking the tally to 27,000 people in the past 11 years. 136,000 animal pests were removed in 2023, giving a total of nearly 850,000 pests since 2012. The collective effort of many people has seen an improvement in kiwi numbers in areas where predators are managed. As a result, Northern brown kiwi have had their status revised from at-risk declining to not threatened conservation dependent due to the extensive conservation efforts. Kiwi and other native species remain absolutely protected under the Wildlife Act of 1953. Other species under pressure from human activity include Australasian bittern, nationally critical, Pārteki, at risk increasing, spotless crepe, at risk declining, and dotterel, nationally threatened declining. Kiwi are an umbrella species, and conservation efforts to protect kiwi has positive effects on other species covered by the Wildlife Act. However, in many areas of Northland where predators are not managed, kiwi numbers have declined due to predation by predators including stoats, feral cats and uncontrollable roaming dogs. The fact that kiwi numbers have held up overall in Northland is due to the community commitment to controlling all of these threats. The key phrase in the new classification for kiwi is conservation dependent. Where predator control is not carried out and poor dog controls exist, kiwi will continue to decline at around 2 to 4% per year. The full complement of integrated predator control. Over 2 decades of the Northland brown kiwi annual call survey, data shows that populations are generally either stable or steadily increasing at the Northland sites where the full complement of integrated pest control is in place, traps and toxins, and the communities are committed to excellent care and control of their dogs. This bucks the national trend identified by the Kiwi Recovery Group of an overall 2% decline per annum for the kiwi population. Any loosening of the dog restrictions would be premature and would undermine the huge effort of the community in areas looking after native bird populations. We believe that loosening the district plan restrictions for dogs and cats will reduce protection for kiwi and other wildlife and will set a precedent for further removal of safeguards. The potential reversal of rules currently in place to protect kiwi. Northland is in a unique area where kiwi are present in unexpected places. We need to protect our tiger species from decline. The adverse effects of any changes will dilute the existing restrictions and would be substantial. This could be a significant detriment to the kiwi in the far north area with long-lasting consequences. The decision we would like from Council is to have the existing dog control conditions retained and strengthened. It will be far too premature to loosen the existing controls and reverse the good work being carried out. We would like to see better education for dog owners together with existing controls and limits on dogs. Strengthening wildlife-friendly, safe dispersal corridors with further pest control is vital. It not only allows vulnerable species, such as Matuku bittern, to find resources needed in times of scarcity and stress, but enables roaming kiwi to travel between discrete populations and patches to find mates, thus supporting the regional gene flow and maintaining a healthy gene pool in the Kiwi population. Kiwi vulnerability. As young Kiwi disperse from their natal area, they can cover large distances in search of suitable habitat and other Kiwi. Allowing more dogs and cats into an area that has successfully breeding Kiwi populations would put these young Kiwi at risk of predation. Locking dogs and cats up at night is only part of the Kiwi protection solution. Kiwi are often exposed during daylight hours when resting within farmland, such as kikuyu grass. They also will shelter in grasses or under ferns as day roosts, and are particularly vulnerable to predation by dogs and cats. Kiwi often travel many kilometres to find and establish new territory. Kiwi will cross open spaces, roads, farmlands, riparian margins, and backyards to move out of their natal territory. Kiwi are very interesting to dogs because of their aromatic smell. Kiwi communicate largely by their sense of smell, which is highly developed. Consequently, dogs will find Kiwi very quickly, and they are often in unexpected places. The dog has mouthed or bitten Kiwi before the owner has even had time to react. Most dog attacks result in dead Kiwi. Dogs tend to kill adult and juvenile Kiwi, whereas stoats tend to kill young Kiwi before they have reached 1,200 grams. The average age of adult Kiwi in Northland is only 14 years, due mainly to dog predation. The full lifespan of Kiwi should be 50 to 60 years. The impact of the loss of adult Kiwi is particularly devastating on the population because of the loss of many years of potential breeding. The loss of an adult disrupts a breeding pair and their territories. Loss of Kiwi during the breeding season often results in abandonment of eggs on the nest, compounding the losses. Kiwi deaths from uncontrolled dogs continue, much to the dismay of all those working hard to help Far North Kiwi thrive. Kiwi Coast's efforts are ongoing with dog owners, communities, DOC and Far North District Council to deliver successful and effective approach that will make a real difference. Recently, Kiwi Coast has developed a Know Your Dog workshop, which is an innovative way to engage dog owners and provide education as a base for increasing responsible dog ownership. To be successful, these efforts need to be continued with support from the district plan. They need continued support from district plan restrictions. Kiwi Coast advocates for responsible pet ownership and supports communities working to reduce feral cats and improve dog control to protect native wildlife. Left unaddressed, feral cats thrive in Northland's temperate forests, predating insects, lizards, aquatic species and birds, including Kiwi chicks. Uncontrolled dogs remain the most significant threat to adult Kiwi survival in Northland. Raising awareness of these issues and stressing the need for good dog control was a recurring theme at all Kiwi Coast events and workshops. Kiwi Live Here signs are customised for groups and selected dog control messages supplied on request. While Kiwi aversion training workshops are held regularly for hunting and working dogs, few resources have been available for owners of pet and lifestyle dogs in Kiwi zones. The new Know Your Dog workshops developed and delivered have begun to fill the gap and have proved to be successful and well received by dog owners. The first workshops were delivered in 2021 and have quickly gained popularity. A further 11 Know Your Dog workshops were held over the last year, taking the 3-year total to 33 workshops. 2018 saw the first of the Kiwi Coast roadside billboards go up in collaboration with DOC in response to requests for help from local communities. Customised billboards in English and Te Reo Māori featuring dog control messaging or advising drivers to slow down for road crossing Kiwi are now spread across Northland. Roadside billboards are now in place in Nungaru, State Highway 1 Hikarangi, Hihi, Mangamuka, Purirua, State Highway 1 Pakaraka, Russell and Patua North. Kiwi avoidance training. Kiwi avoidance training, or KAT, as a mitigation method was developed in response to hunting and farming dogs encountering kiwi while working. These dogs are generally well trained to focus on the task at hand, e.g. rounding up sheep or hunting pigs. And they know to ignore distractions, i.e. not chasing possums or rabbits. As they already have the concept of ignore, KAT training generally works well for these dogs. Most pet dogs are not well trained as dogs with jobs and typically don't have the same understanding about ignore. Thus, it is harder for them to learn from KAT training. Moreover, the effect of KAT wears off over time and would require long-term and substantial commitment from owners to carry out regular dog retraining. KAT training is not particularly reliable as a primary method for protecting kiwi from pet dogs, and instead specialists would recommend that physical distance is maintained through other means. Both in high density and kiwi present areas, it is very difficult for there to be reliable physical distance kept at all times, and that the owner may need to rely on KAT training for pet dogs as a primary method. This would not be safe for kiwi in the area. Kiwi deaths from dogs, we've heard about the table. I won't go into that. I'd just like to conclude what we'd like to see from council. Any loosening of the dog restrictions would be premature and would undermine the huge effort the community in areas looking after native bird populations. We believe that loosening the district plan regulations for dogs and cats will reduce protection for kiwi and other wildlife and will set a precedent for further removal of safeguards. We believe that the existing regulations should not be loosened, as changing the existing regulations has the potential of long-term cumulative effects which will arise over time. The decision we would like from council is to have the existing dog control conditions retained and strengthened. We would like to see better education for dog owners together with existing controls and limits on dogs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have you got any other evidence to give to us, or does that conclude your presentation?
That concludes it. Yes.
Okay. Oh, well, thank you very much. I just want to acknowledge on behalf of the panel your volunteer commitment to achieving biodiversity and Indigenous biodiversity outcomes, particularly with regards to kiwi. We understand, we know you're a voluntary organisation, so thank you very much for your advocacy and commitment to those things. We'll see if the panel has any specific questions. I've asked a few, so I'll let some of the other panellists ask you some questions.
You've covered a number of areas in terms of the presentation, and I mean, just looking at the objectives and policies that you queried earlier on in the evidence and the like, and you're looking at some rewording some of that. We really need to go through that and look at that closely in terms of the rewording. But I noticed in particular just the first one on your page 9, IB-02, and you're concerned with the wording there of managed biodiversity. I mean, on the face of it, the way that you want it reworded would be to maintain, protect and enhance the existing Indigenous biodiversity, but I guess that would provide no scope for any reduction in that Indigenous biodiversity whatsoever. I mean, whether that be through natural causes or necessity or the like. And I guess that might be part of the reason that the suggestion made in papers is for the word managed to be used. And that's quite a usual sort of RMA type classification way of dealing with matters now. Do you have any comments on that at all?
No, not on that particular one.
Yeah. Because I mean, at the end of the day, it's not a rule. It's hard and fast, and this is what you've got to do. It's an objective, and you might be aiming to have that objective, but you don't always achieve an objective, obviously. And look, just on the matter of the kiwi situation, I mean, I understand the council often imposes a standard sort of condition on subdivision consents that, you know, there's to be no dogs or one dog or restriction. Do you have any evidence or any experience of how successful or otherwise that condition on subdivision consents is?
Yeah, generally it's quite successful because it's a covenant put on the title. And to remove that covenant off the title requires quite a process of appeal.
Yes.
Which is both costly and time consuming. We see only one or two of those come through each year. The council works very closely with DOC on the density maps, and they're quite well defined, and those density maps generally coincide with where people are doing the intensive pest control, and they've got a good dog control message going out.
Well, that's comforting to know. So are there particular areas where kiwi are prevalent that you apply those sorts of controls as compared to other parts of Northland?
The mid-north area where regional council do a lot of funding for kiwi protection, and I can talk about the Purirua Peninsula in particular. Our estimate of population is 2,000 to 3,000 kiwi just on that peninsula. So that's approaching a quarter to a third of all of Northland's population. They're thriving there because the community is right behind it, and we've got a pest eradication program going on there for stoats and feral cats. So the number of kiwi, some of our trackers at night with their thermal equipment were counting 40, 50 kiwi out on pasture, which is hugely significant. You don't see that through the bulk of the rest of Northland. So it's success stories like that that give us a lot of encouragement for the work that we're doing. And if we can translate that through the rest of Northland, kiwi should be in our backyards, and with responsible pet ownership, the two can coexist.
So in terms of what you've just said, then a major component of that is community support to the idea. So, you know, maybe education at school level, you know.
Yes, we go into schools, we run tracking workshops, we speak with iwi and hapu. So we use all of those avenues to get the message across.
Thanks very much.
Maybe to add to that, when you have a new subdivision development like the Tubbs Farm and on Kapira Road in Kirikiri, the developer has unhappily agreed to have a dog and cat restriction for these new 130 houses because there's the Pamitana River which does have kiwi living there, so conditions still have to be worked out. The Environment Court has unfortunately allowed the development against our opposition, but at least we have some protective measures in place. So we hope that people who love their dogs so much that they cannot live without them, that they would not move into that subdivision. Obviously, there's always an impact of danger that people may not follow the rules, in particular not later on. I mean, initially it might be followed, and then 10, 20 years later nobody cares to remember the rules. But such restrictions definitely are helpful.
Yes, so in that particular subdivision that you're referring to, and I'm not aware of, but in that particular one, was the Environment Court supportive of a kiwi a dog restriction type covenant or the like?
Yes.
Which might have done better than you thought then.
Yeah, which was offered already by the developer because our submissions against the development were so strong that they have agreed not to have dogs and cats.
Well, thanks, Robert.
Oh, thank you. Thank you all for your contribution today. I just wanted to check in the material you've handed out. There was a bit on starting on page 15 about the coastal environment chapter. You talked to us about that. Is there anything you wanted to highlight in that sort of passage there? I might have missed it, but
answer to that. I think coastal areas are in particular covered with forests and are kept naturally by law. And so obviously they are more likely than not to be Kiwi inhabitants or to be people belonging to that belt from the northland to further north, to the middle of the country, even to Ōmāpere forest. And this corridor is very important for Kiwi to be able to extend their life area. So, please.
Yeah, and one of the particular concerns that we had about the coastal environment is that due to the new mapping of the area now called the coastal environment by the NRC, the area that's actually covered by coastal zoning protection is just substantially reduced, because if you look at the maps, the area that's now classified as a result of the NRC work as coastal environment is really quite narrow in some places. It's really just, in some areas, just a ribbon along the edge. And yet, and then the land behind it that was coastal zone has now become, or is proposed to be, mainly rural production, things like that, in the new PDP. And as a result, when you're actually in the marine area, looking at this land, I mean, we would say that large areas are coastal and should be covered by the coastal protection provisions relating to character, natural character, and so on. But because of the very narrow definition and mapping, these new areas that are now rural production don't have that kind of protection as far as we can see. And our point on page 16 was that that it would be highly desirable for the PDP to actually recognise this problem and that make some kind of provision so that the areas of land that are visible from the marine area do have their character protected. So it's not just that narrow strip along the edge. If I'll explain.
May I just add to that again on the Tubbs Farm development, which I just mentioned. It is a coastal area, and the developer started doing stage 1 and 2 on the side most closest to the coast, and then when they presented stage 3 to 6, they argued, well, actually from the coast, these 4 new stages are not visible, and therefore they shouldn't be considered coastal. So that refers to what Melanie said, the strips are getting smaller or thinner, and so the whole area was supposed to be coastal, and all of a sudden you only have a little strip, and the rest is mixed residential.
We've been told that the coastal environment line that they've drawn on the maps is consistent with what's in the regional policy statement, so that they've just taken that down and put it in. You don't think that that's accurate, or?
Well, if you stand on the beach, say at Kerikeri Inlet, and look across to the other side, you can see large areas of hillside that are no longer in the coastal zone and they don't have coastal protection, their characteristics, but they were in the coastal. It's like suddenly that layer of protections has been removed by the mapping exercise.
Right.
So perhaps it is consistent with the RPS, but perhaps it isn't. I don't know, but it doesn't seem, it just seems like a rather like a backward step to have that type of protection removed from quite large areas of land.
Yeah.
And it would be the same around the district.
Yeah, okay, thank you. We might hear from the staff.
So maybe we just need to investigate more, I think.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
And just while we're on your page 16, the last bit there that I noticed was you talking about coastal environment standard 3. Is there anything that you want to highlight? This is the last little bit on page 15. Earthworks and indigenous vegetation clearance in the coastal environment.
Yes, we do find that actually overall, the amount of earthworks that's allowed seems to be really quite problematic. And then this was just one example where in the coastal environment chapter, they proposed what we consider to be rather a large area of permitted earthworks. And the Section 42 report seems to make the situation worse because it seems to be recommending up to 4,100 within a calendar year. We queried that because maybe that's just a typo in the amended.
I was going to say, we can probably have that fact checked in real time.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
the intent here is 100 metres per car.
Okay. So you can strike out, what does that mean?
That's for sure.
Does that give you a sense of relief?
That's what I believe.
Hundreds, maybe square.
Yeah.
Yes, I can imagine 4,100.
Yes.
Oh, so we're on with it.
Oh, yeah, okay.
When you strike for the forwards.
But it's still substantially more than.
Yeah.
Right, okay, I think how that's coming
It's,
out.
it's still substantially more than 400 square meters in 10 years, to have 100 square meters per calendar year.
Yeah.
So you think it should be at least a number? Even that 100?
It's the same problem really as the vegetation clearance rules. You know, when you allow a certain amount per year, then over time, you can actually get some quite substantial cumulative amounts.
It's the death of 100 cuts.
Then 5,000, yes. The structures, and of course, you know, with the earthworks, anyway, sorry, there's future chapters on that, so maybe we don't need to discuss it now.
That is
But there are
clarifying.
big issues, I think.
Thank you.
Sediment.
And before I let you go, can we just sort of talk about dogs then? Again, yesterday, we had the Bay of Islands Watchdogs hearing, and we had quite a bit of discussion about the Dog Control Act and the Dog Control Bylaw that comes through that act. Do you, and their clear preference was that was a good instrument to use. Do you have any views about that particular act and the bylaws that come out of it in terms of how that relates to kiwi predation by dogs?
The Dog Control Act as it stands now. One of the things that we observe is the resources to control that act and to enforce it. If the majority of people in, say, Northland abided by that Animal Control Act, we would have far fewer problems. We often see roaming dogs which are let off at night. We had one just last week where our cameras picked up 2 roaming dogs in a high density kiwi area. And that was simply because they weren't following the rules of chaining up their dogs, keeping them inside at night. So, yeah, the enforcement would go a long way under the existing act.
Right, okay. And the proposed changes by the 42A report have included a definition of pest. Do you have any comments to make on that suggested amendment?
It's not.
Was it? I mean, basically, they were going to define pest as defined in the Northland Regional Council Pest Management Plan.
That is a limited range of species and that and doesn't cover dogs at the current time, and I can't really see them ever being classified as dogs, as pests, that name. I think it would be a problem if we rely only on that list as a means to control dogs. I think
what you'd have is both instruments. You'd have your Dog Control Act, which is a specific dog instrument, and the dog bylaws, which you can be prepared for a specific district. But I think what we heard from you yesterday was that the term pests is also included in that management plan, and it could include a pest, a dog, rogue dog.
Yeah, so the recommended definition of pest to align that with the regional pest control management plan, but there's still policy direction related to pets. So we're retaining that, so you still have control or scope to control, impose controls over dogs, so we're not proposing to change that. So that's policy 9 in the Indigenous Biodiversity chapter.
So perhaps you could have a look at that. So the dogs aren't excluded from that, the plan is what we heard. But you have that whole dog-specific act and bylaw as well. I think that's the range of controls. Would that be a fair summary?
Yeah. But I guess the key there was really to focus or retain that ability through the subdivision process to impose consent conditions related to pets as appropriate.
Yeah.
Can I just get one point clear on that too? Just going back on that earthworks and indigenous vegetation clearance, so CE-S3.
Yeah.
So the current minimum plan is a total area of 400 squares for 10 years from the date of notification. The recommendation is to increase it to 100 square metres within a calendar year. Is that a replacement of the 400 squares or?
Correct, and that was based on discussions with Malene around the different nature of earthworks versus vegetation clearance.
Right.
And so earthworks, her view, and I agree with that. There's little risk of them being taken each calendar year. You only do them with regular purpose versus indigenous vegetation clearance rules. There's much more risk of incremental clearance each year. So that's why we propose the different thresholds over those different time periods.
Thanks.
You say you have a question.
Thank you for the presentation. I can't remember, sorry, if this might have been a question related to Mr. Cochrane. But yeah, there was referenced there's 259 organisations in Northland that are doing kiwi protection. What I wanted to ask was, what are areas where kiwi numbers are declining, if you're aware of that, and are there any restrictions in these particular areas where kiwis are declining? Because it's great to hear with Purerua Peninsula, the community and a whole lot of programs in place, which is great. As you say, the numbers are increasing, and that's what the Bay of Islands watchdogs have said, numbers are increasing for brown kiwi. But would you know where the areas are where the kiwi numbers are declining, and if there are any restrictions in those areas or not?
We live in the Kirikiri River basin across the Stonestor, which when we moved here 22 years ago, we were told that there were still kiwi in the basin. We were kind of doubtful because we never saw or heard any. We hear usually walk-walks, which sound somewhat similar. But 7 years later, 5 years later, the bypass was constructed and a kiwi dog was used to check whether there were any kiwi, and they found one female, old female kiwi, which then was transported to Bukiti Forest. So we can now assume that there are no kiwi anymore in the Kirikiri Basin. However, we are still under controls. We are by dog, we are neighbors of dog, so we're not supposed to have any animals, which obviously we don't, contrary to the previous owners of the place. So there are generally no controls. There's just an appeal from dog not to have any animals. So that's one area, but I'm sure that there are larger areas.
Yeah, so I can talk to the big picture, and that is that the DOC call surveys break it up into 4 main areas. So far north, mid north, Whangarei area, and the far west. In Bay of Islands and Whangarei, where there's a lot of predator control and community input, the numbers are steadily rising on average when you put all the data together. In the far north, it's declining, and over in the west, it's declining. We believe that that is often with pig dogs that are going into the area and not coming out with the owner, and hence roaming. In terms of specifics, we in the Bay of Islands are hearing from people that they didn't hear Kiwi 20 years ago, but they're hearing them now. And in fact, down in the Stone Store Basin, down near Edkins Road, there's a Kiwi that comes and taps on the window of a house right at the end. So they are still there and they're hanging on. And they often won't have a female if it's a male, so they'll be living a lonely existence. And down in the Kerry Inlet, people have said, I've heard a Kiwi calling. So again, down that area, we believe it's a lone male. So we are finding isolated populations or isolated birds, but we're also hearing where populations have been decimated in the past, again by pig dogs. After 20 years, they're just starting to come back. So it takes a long time to get them back if all of your other controls are in place.
Another quick question. So with the training program, you have to know your dog, that's great. Is that voluntary and does it include the Bay of Islands watchdog group?
Yes, it is voluntary, and it's generally in response to a community group saying, can you come and present?
Great.
So it's not a mandated thing. Yeah. Whereas the KAT, the Kiwi Avoidance Training, is often put on a title. If a dog is allowed, it will have to have Kiwi Aversion Training.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think that concludes all of our questions for you. So thank you again for your advocacy, your submission, your evidence that you've delivered today and the answers to our questions. And keep up the good work, I suppose.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to see you again in another hearing.
Yeah, I've got to say, we'll see you again next week. Oh, of course, that's right, hearing number 5.
That's right.
The area of was going to be right, so we're going to be having an afternoon, do you have a copy of this?
Oh, thank you.
And then we're going to have Mr. Alec Jack. Is that Mr. Alec Jack here? So we're going to have a 20-minute adjournment. You can make your way up to the table whenever you like, and we'll see you back here at 10 minutes to 4. Thank you. We'll adjourn to then.
Thank you very much.